Good evening. This is Morgan Johnson. Today I want to go over the odd and unusual circumstances that surrounded the JFK assassination and why I think there were larger forces at work than Lee Harvey Oswald. Now you talk about suppression of evidence and obstruction of justice. Now this case has a lot of both. I'm only going to scratch the surface, but it's quite fascinating and there's reasons to speculate. But before I dive in, I want to say that I'm only interested in this case. I'm not a fanboy of John F. Kennedy. I'm not biased like a lot of people. To illustrate my point, there's this photo of him. He's smoking a cigar, wearing sunglasses, and he's got a suit and tie on, and he's leaned back in a chair blowing smoke. And I just think that looks way too cool. And then he's also courageous. He's very inspirational. And he's far too interesting. You see, me, I'm much more into mediocrity, like flavorless bubblegum and celebrity DJs. Not to mention, the man has very, very nice hair. And that's just something I'm not into. So let's make that official. And, speaking of official, the official investigation told us that Oswald was the only one involved, that this was the work of a madman and lone assassin. Now this itself doesn't make me question it. A lot of people have an issue with it, but I don't know why people can't come to the fact that it's quite obvious that anyone with a loaded gun is capable of killing anybody, given the opportunity. So it's not that makes me speculate. It's how it happened in the investigation that followed that forced me to wonder if there was more than one person involved. There has to be more to it. In the deepest depth of my soul, I am pretty damn sure there's something more to it. Just like a get-rich-quick scheme. You can't take it at face value. Why? Because you know there's a little bit more to it. Or let's say your significant other breaks up with you and they say the old famous line, "It's not you, it's me." We've all been there and we all know there is more to the story. And as certain as I am that the sun will rise tomorrow, I am certain that in the case of Kennedy's assassination, there is probably more to it. You can note that I said probably because there's no way I can prove that something happened. This whole podcast is about speculation. But what is certain is the investigation of John F. Kennedy's murder is as filthy and unclear as the waters of the mighty Mississippi. Two things: suppression of evidence, obstruction of justice. What a nasty game played by the very powerful. Not even the murder of our beloved president is insusceptible. So, okay, let's first get into this by staging the crime scene. So the presidential limo is driving away from the school book depository building when Oswald, who's on the 6th floor, fires the rifle. He hits JFK twice, once in the neck and once in the head. Oswald is arrested and charged with the murder the same day. 2 days later, Oswald is killed in the garage at the Dallas police station by Jack Ruby. There's two main takeaways here. The first one is the reaction of the president being shot. This is by far the most contradicting pieces of evidence we have. And there's video footage of it you can find easily with the Google search, Zapruder film, Zapruder. But as mentioned earlier, Oswald is on the 6th floor when he fires the rifle. The presidential limo passed the building about 5 to 10 seconds prior. Oswald's point of view is almost directly behind the president. The first shot hits Kennedy in the throat. He jolts up, clenches his throat and starts to lean forward. All of this does seem consistent. But the next shot is where things get weird. Second shot hits Kennedy in the head. The front right side of his head opens up. It's pretty graphic. And his body and head kind of jolt back and to the left. Now this doesn't really seem consistent with a bullet coming from behind. It seems more likely that that bullet came from the front. And if you've ever heard of the grassy knoll, this is where that comes into play. In that grassy knoll area, there's a wooden picket fence, and there's a bunch of trees and shade. It seemed like a decent spot to try to pull off something like this. It's in the front and to the right of the limo. And like I said, the president, once he gets hit in the head, he goes back and to the left. So it seems very likely that the fatal shot came from that area, which means more than one person involved, which means it's a conspiracy. Like I said, this is probably the number one issue with accepting the fact that Oswald was the lone assassin. Like I said, you have two shots, two different reactions, and a lot of people have tried to explain the reactions. I've heard one theory suggests that the bullet hit a certain part of his brain and it forced a muscle to tense up, and that's why he moved back instead of forward. There's been a back brace excuse, which he did wear a back brace. Ballistics tests, etc. But the bottom line here is that there's two different reactions. And they're very different. It's not subtle. It's clear as day. And it just makes you question things. Okay, let's make an example. Let's say we're in a mosh pit. You got Pantera playing, you got fist pumping, you got a full beer, you're really happy. People all around you. Let's say, bam, someone shoves you from behind and your beer kind of spills, but you pick it up just in time, you got a couple sips left. You turn around, you look at the person like, what the heck? Kind of shoved me a little bit too hard, it's not cool. Say a few seconds later, 5 seconds later, whatever, you shoved again, but this time you kind of go backwards. Yeah, spill the beer and all the beer is gone. It's just a bad day at this point. Now there's two likely scenarios here. The first one is two different people shoved you. That's probably the most likely. The other scenario is the same asshole that shoved you came all the way around and shoved you again. Unlikely. And as that relates to the Kennedy assassination, I just don't think Oswald could have fired a rifle, moved 6 stories and, 100 so feet, fired another one in 6 seconds, unless he was a bird. That was supposed to sound really stupid, because I don't believe that he could have done it. I believe there was more than one person involved. Moving on. If that's not enough to convince you that something shady happened, let's talk about the murder of Oswald. So like I said, he's arrested and 2 days later he's killed. Well, he's killed on live television, actually. The man charged with killing the most influential person on the planet is locked up. I would think at the time, this is the most heavily guarded prisoner in the world. And the overall goal here is to put him on trial. We'll keep him safe, then put him on trial. Get every bit of information you can out of him. And convict him if found guilty. Makes sense, right? Look, this is the greatest assassination since President Lincoln. You have to get this right. Or you can say, fuck it. Let's just allow some local to walk right up to him, point blank, and shoot him. I guess they didn't learn that 48 hours prior, that a lack of security could result in a quick death of someone important. I kind of refuse to believe that the Dallas police or that incompetent. Let's look at two possibilities here. The first is maybe you could just walk up to prisoner and public enemy number one, shoot him point blank. The same guy who killed the most influential person in the world, the greatest assassin since James Wilkes Booth, or John Wilkes Booth, whoever the hell killed Lincoln. Maybe it's just that easy. I am willing to accept the fact that in 63, security was much different. It's a possibility. I mean, a lot of things are possible, though. Well, let's look at this possibility. Maybe Oswald, this self-proclaimed patsy, knew something. Maybe he wasn't the only one involved. Maybe he didn't even shoot the president. Maybe he was set up. Maybe it's Maybelline. Maybe he needed to be silenced before given an opportunity of a fair trial. Maybe he was going to be a whistleblower, and a lot of powerful people's asses were on the line. Now, could this be the murder of Oswald? Dare I say it? Obstruction of justice? Suppression of information? Considering the already odd circumstances, yes, absolutely that's a possibility. I mean, in the year 2020, that's something we can all relate to. Cough, cough, Jeffrey Epstein. This is common sense, folks. Back and to the left, the assassin, or should I say, quote-unquote assassin, assassinated. It's all connected. Coincidence? Maybe. Conspiracy? Probably. Okay. Now, if you're still feeling comfortable with the Warren Commission, then ponder this. To this day, there are records of the investigation that are still sealed. Can you believe that? It's been about 57 years. 57 years to think about the possibilities. 57 years since the bullet forced the president back into the left. 56 years, or 7. It's 56, but almost 57. 57 years to ask if there was more to it. Now, I searched the National Archives, and there's a quote on there that says, with very few exceptions, virtually all the records identified as belonging to the Kennedy collection have been opened, in part or in full. Those documents that are closed in full or in part were done so in accordance with the Kennedy Act mentioned above. According to the Act, no record could be withheld in part or in full without the agreement of the ARRB, which stands for the Assassination Records Review Board. It goes on to say, in addition, according to Section 5G 2D of the Act, all records in the Kennedy collection will be opened by 2017 unless certified as justifiably closed by the President of the United States. I think the main belief here among skeptics is that by the time the files are released in full, anyone involved in the murder and or the investigation will be long gone and not have to face any punishment. I'd say that, or absolute best case scenario, maybe there is a explanation for the president's reactions being different. Maybe there's an explanation for Ruby and Oswald. Maybe they weren't even connected. It was just crazy coincidence. Best case scenario, government did something really shady behind closed doors, because there's no reason that nearly 6 decades later they have files that are still sealed. That's ridiculous. I mean, hell, I would think that in an effort to kill off some of these conspiracy theories, and the vast majority of them are stupid, in an effort to kill off a lot of these conspiracy theories, why not be transparent? Why not give all of the information gathered and just open it up to everyone? I think most people, most reasonable people, are capable of changing their mind once given new information. I think it would be much easier to accept the Warren Commission's findings if they said, you know what, here's everything we found. Most reasonable people could accept it. Not all, because there are some people who will only accept what they want to believe. We all know these type of people. I mean, a lot of people like that are my friends. You know, some of them, for lack of a better term, would be described as, a stubborn jackass. We all have that friend or family member that will basically have an idea, and it could be as simple as the sky is blue. But they will absolutely not accept it, and they will dismiss it. They will say whatever, there's an explanation for it, yada yada. Some people only accept alternative facts. From my experience, it seems like the people who are far left and far right are like that. It's kind of funny how people on the far left and people on the far right are literally the same exact person. Very stubborn, very emotionally charged humans are not capable of thinking critically, thinking objectively, and just can't be reasoned with. But anyways, at the end of the day, no matter how it happened, the fact is it did happen. Kennedy was killed, 46 years old, only in office for about 1,000 days, and his life and vision, of course, were cut short. So, we just think of why it happened, and I don't think it was because Kennedy was controversial, because the reality is all presidents are controversial. But what I think he did was he threatened a lot of very powerful people. To take it a step further, Eisenhower had talked about the military-industrial complex right before he left office. And he warns about the pursuit of power, and basically, in a nutshell, war is very profitable. There are people and certain institutions that make a lot of money from war. It's very sad, but it's very true. And Kennedy, it's heavily speculated that he wanted to withdraw from Vietnam. I think maybe it's probably because he went to war and he saw what it's like firsthand, how nasty and how violent war actually is. And if he withdraws, a lot of people, such as maybe the Pentagon, defense contractors, those type of people would have lost not thousands, not millions, but billions of dollars. There are certain people and certain institutions that profit dramatically off of war. And that's very sad, and that's why we should be alert and really put our politicians under a lot of scrutiny. Because who knows what the real motives are. But anyways, this is speculation. But it's what I think is the most likely scenario. Kennedy would have withdrew. A lot of very powerful people would have lost money, which in turn is a loss of power. And I think they came to a collective agreement that they had to try to get rid of him. I think Kennedy was a hero. He fought for what he believed in and paid a tremendous price. And a lot of people want to say, oh, Kennedy, he was a womanizer, and he screwed up in the Bay of Pigs, and which he was, and which he did screw up in the Bay of Pigs. I can't remember. There's some other controversies of his. And I sit back and say, wow, okay, so he had his vices, he screwed up, he certainly wasn't perfect. It's almost as if he was human. Wow, that's an interesting concept. I wasn't under the impression that Kennedy was a god. Huh. That is really crazy. No, I just think it's so stupid that we as humans, we hold people to the standards of someone who's supposed to be perfect. And it's just unrealistic. I'm not excusing I'm not excusing him for being a womanizer, cheating on Jackie, which I frown upon dramatically because she was fucking badass. She was awesome. But at the end of the day, he's human. He has things that are not. He has traits that are not endearing. But what you got to do is put the positives and the negatives together, weigh them all together, and hopefully there's more positive than negative. And in the case with Kennedy, there are certainly more positives than negatives. So for those of you who are into this cancel culture bullshit, literally go f*** off, because your expectations are so unrealistic that if you judged everyone by the standards of someone that's supposed to be perfect, there would be no one left on earth. Got a little sidetracked, but I would say that despite the tragedy here in this story, that there is a silver lining with Kennedy's untimely death. As we know, we call them the, the 27 Club, or just anyone that's young in general that passes away. They naturally have their legacies elevated, and I think it's mostly because we think of what if. There's a curiosity factor that drives their legacy higher than basically what it would have been if they died natural causes, or died at 70 years old or 80 or whatever. His legacy has definitely benefited from his assassination. And I think as a public figure, a president whose goal was to touch people's lives in a positive way, having an amazing legacy is probably the greatest glory of all. And I think, just like Lincoln, I say 100 years from now, people will still be talking about John F. Kennedy. They will still be very well aware of who he is and what he did. And inspire those. He's definitely inspired me. He's a very interesting human being, and his story motivates me to get out of bed, and try to make an impact. And there's a quote, and I apologize for paraphrasing this, but it's something that Kennedy had said. And this is a closing statement. People will die, nations will fall, but an idea will live on forever.